Thank you for coming to check out another episode of the Stash Cast, where we have interesting conversations with interesting people focused on the world of commercial real estate and prop tech. The Stash Cast is brought to you by Needle. What if you could use data and analytics to predict real estate transactions? You can with Needle. Come check it out at Needle, NEDL.us to learn more. All right, today I am super excited. We have Vivin Hegde with us today with Zacua Ventures. And this is actually the first opportunity that Vivin and I have had a chance to connect, but I saw that he was going to be a speaker at an upcoming prop tech and construction tech event called Blueprint Conference. And I was like, this guy, I want to hear what he has to say. So Vivin, I appreciate you taking some time and thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So I gave a very short version of who you are and what you do, but maybe for those who don't know who you are and what you do, maybe you could give us a brief introduction.
Absolutely. I'm a general partner at Zacua Ventures. Zacua is an early stage fund focused on construction tech. And when we say construction tech, it's all kinds of building around us. So we think about infrastructure, commercial, residential, we'll dabble all across the space. We'll look at the entire value chain, all the way from design, construction to operation of buildings, including supply chains. And we invest primarily in three themes. The first is around bringing productivity to these processes. So anything around robotics, anything around AI, automation of these processes, vertical SaaS, whether it's procurement, payments, design, so all of these spaces, right? So that is one theme that we invest in. Theme two is around decarbonization. So anything around new materials, anything around smart buildings, circular economy, or recycling. So any of these aspects. And theme three is around building resiliency. So whether you look at grid infrastructure, whether you look at solar, you look at EVs, you look at affordable housing, new supply chains. So what can help us build resiliency across all of these aspects is something that we pay a lot of attention to. So those are the three spaces that we invest in. We're early stage investors, so we invest pre-seed to A, and we invest globally. So I look after North America and India operations. I have a partner based in Madrid who looks after Europe, and a partner based in Singapore. And then we have teammates in New York, Mexico, Dubai, Melbourne, Madrid. So quite a global team, even though we are early stage and fairly young. So I'll pause with the Zacua background. Happy to dive more into my own background, but see if you have any questions before that.
Yeah, no, I want to get into that more as we converse, but just how did it's super niche what you're doing and it's amazing. So how did you get into it?
So I used to run the corporate venture capital fund for Hilti, which is a corporate entity, and it manufactured tools and materials, and now it's getting to software and so on. Me and a colleague actually set the team up, and then we looked at ramping it up, thinking about where to invest, how to invest, and so on and so forth. And we saw a lot of value out of that. That team has now enabled Hilti to get into software, into robotics, exoskeletons, concrete sensors, and so on. So we saw that CVCs added a lot of value to corporates. On the other hand, we also saw ecosystem where startups struggled with fragmentation because it's very difficult to reach these corporates, very difficult to get access to customers. Understanding workflows was hard. And this pattern was repeating both in the startup ecosystem and in the corporate ecosystem. And my partners comes from Cemex, and they show similar things. And I was also
Mhm.
working with the Hilti Trimble JV. We saw similar things there. And we said it would be amazing to have a medium which brings together these corporates and these startups. So on one hand, it de-risks the early existence of these startups by providing them pilots, by providing them understanding of workflows, and also capital, right? It provides all of that. So the chances of success of these startups increases significantly by working with people who know the space, who have the network. On the other hand, the corporates would benefit from better insights, access to deal flow, which improves the innovation engine and innovation strategy. And from a VC perspective, you're in the best of all worlds. You are providing so much more value than any generalist could provide in this space, and you get access to the best deals. That is the perfect recipe for building an ecosystem. Coupled with the fact that if you look at macro, climate change cannot be addressed without addressing the built environment, right?
Sure.
40% of emission come from this space. You look at infrastructure bill and all the issues that we have in terms of bridges, dams, and so on and so forth. That cannot happen without bringing more efficiency into the space. Affordable housing is such a big problem, and without more efficient processes, that can't be solved. So from a macro perspective, everything is supporting the growth of this industry and the technology adoption in this industry. That coupled with an innovative model just positioned us in a place where that kind of unique value proposition is hard to replicate.
Yeah, that's amazing. As you were speaking, I'm like, "Oh, he is helping facilitate outsourced corporate research and development." That seems like what you're doing because and maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like a lot of corporations, they're so focused on the core business that they risk falling off and falling behind the competition. So that you're providing a bridge between what's new and up and coming and the corporations by helping them get, and you're helping the startups too get pilot programs. Those are invaluable because I sometimes talk with other founders and they're like, yeah, I'm trying to solve this problem. Okay, great. Do you come from that world? No, but I just see it as an issue. And I'm like, then I almost feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I almost feel like it's a little pompous for somebody who doesn't have any experience in a given business to be like, oh, I'm going to come in and just solve this problem.
So I think new ideas are always welcome, right? New ideas are always welcome, and injection of new talent and blood in the industry is always a positive. But it is more nuanced than that. You need to bring that new blood and new ideas, but use the understanding of the workflows to ensure these ideas are not crashing and burning because the workflows are just not sometimes not so flexible, right? So typically, when we look at founders, the best mix is someone who's a technological expert and someone who's an expert in the space. So you're getting the best of both worlds. You're leveraging your understanding to apply the technology in the right way. So
Mhm.
technology is not the problem in most of the issues today. It is the application of the technology and adaptation of the technology to address the problems that we have. And sometimes that's missing, right? I wouldn't say it's always missing. Sometimes that's missing. So the best founders are the ones who are able to bring both of these worlds together.
As you were describing the best founder pairs, you described accurately my partner and myself. We haven't really had a chance to talk, but I've been in commercial real estate as a broker for basically my whole career. Started in 2008 and took me many years to get traction. But as I built a practice, the occurrence of talking with a given property owner and no, we're not doing anything right now. And then all of a sudden you see a deal, a trade come through or a listing pop up. And I just talked to that guy. So my partner, he's a senior vice president in charge of data and analytics at I will not name the company, but significant institution here in town. And he's, hey, my partners and I have a background in software. We want to get into buying real estate. And I was like, well, if you guys have background in software, what about this? And I pitched him, what if you could use data and analytics to predict real estate transactions? And so we slowly moved down that path over a little while, and we're on our way to launch our launch our product here in September, and
Awesome.
it's been quite a grind, but it's been good. And it's exactly what you described, though. He's the technical guy. He knows how to, he understands what I'm trying to accomplish, and he can talk with our data scientists and team to, okay, these are the things you should look at. Whereas if I'm trying to come at it just on my own, I have no idea. It's, you know,
It makes complete sense. And there's a lot of learning in this journey. And I, I think putting the right team is essential to getting a faster traction. It's not that one or the other profile won't be able to solve this, but you just make it easier on yourself if you have the right team from the get.
for sure. Yeah. Could I figure it out? Maybe. I don't know. But it's can you leverage others' talents and abilities so that everybody benefits? And it sounds like that's what you're doing and that's what we're working on as well. But you mentioned that you like to focus on pre-seed to series A, maybe so early in
Mhm.
a company's journey or life cycle. That can be a risky time. So how do you buffer against that, or how do you work with your companies to ensure that they're gonna be successful?
It's definitely a risky time, and
Yeah,
it's not the easiest of spaces to invest in. And that's where I think our understanding of the workflows is very helpful, right? Because we're not just always betting on the founder. Yes, a lot of bets are founder bets, but we're also understanding the macro. We're understanding the workflow. We are understanding the pain points that all the stakeholders are facing in this space. So that also means that diligence is sometimes more extensive because we don't just talk to the startup, we talk to the customers, we talk to other ecosystem partners. If it's a hardware startup, we might send the sample somewhere or look at what's under the hood in the robotic startup. So there's a lot of other levels of diligence that we need to do with some of these startups. But a lot of it is also betting on the macro and the pain point itself, right? Because if that is a very strong tailwind, then it gives a little bit of flexibility for the founder to make some mistakes, right? If you are swimming against the tide, you have to be an exceptional founder. And then, even then, it doesn't always work out. So
Sure.
they still back exceptional founders, but if it's an exceptional founder swimming with the current, then you are very well positioned, right? We try to get both of them together. And even then, sometimes it won't succeed, right? But you want to give yourself the best odds of success. And that happens when all of these things come together.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Um, Going back to your time at Hilti, I know what Hilti is because growing up, I worked in construction with my dad, and we used the Hilti to nail anything to concrete. Really, so that's amazing that they've evolved with the times. So I guess I'm trying to think. I'm fascinated by what you're talking about because it's so if you're talking about affordable housing and then you've talked about, I guess, automation and things like that, what are some of the most innovative startups that you've been a part of that you're helping to change the built environment with?
So let me pick a few. I will pick a few in different dimensions. So one of the hottest topics of our times is data centers, right?
Mhm.
If you look at data centers, they're critically important because the amount of data consumption is exponentially increasing. AI is becoming omnipresent, present everywhere. But we can't progress unless we have capacity to process this. And data center is a critical infrastructural component of that. The problem with data centers today is they have to be super large, which means their energy consumption is very high, which means the water consumption is very high. They need quite a bit of land. And then because you're setting up these giga centers, they have to be far away and you have to build the grid infrastructure and all of that, which causes a few issues. Nobody wants a data center in their backyard. They want it as far away as possible. And it causes issues in terms of latency, it causes issues in terms of land acquisition. Today, the timeline for setting up a new data center, if you start right from the permitting process, is almost 5 years. And we don't have 5 years all the time to set this up. The second part of it is there's no space in urban centers to have data centers. So if you can't put up a data center in your house, not possible, right? But there's lots of vacant real estate there. Office occupancy is at one of the lowest numbers in San Francisco, New York, and a lot of other places. And the final topic is we have to be sustainable. So the carbon footprint of data centers is increasing over a period of time. So all of these are very big macro factors that we want to address. So there's a startup called FlexNode. What they're doing is they're trying to solve all of this at once. They're creating micro data centers. So they've built technology or leveraged existing technology to miniaturize the data center in a container and completely modular container. They're using liquid cooling to bring down the carbon footprint. And now you can place it in parking lots. You can place it in buildings. And since it's modular, you also don't have to cut through buildings to install them. You can install them in lots of other places. And you can use the heat for preheating swimming pools or buildings or whatever. So now you can set something up in 3 months, what used to take 5 years. You can set it up in urban centers. You can reduce the carbon footprint and you can reuse heat. All of those are, but building this is a significant technical challenge. It's like a very hard to pull off, especially making it configurable, making it AI oriented, ensuring deployment is seamless, ensuring a supply chain is good, and so on and so forth, right? So this is what the FlexNode team is doing. They just got the Department of Energy grant. So one of NVIDIA's chief scientists invested. The original chief scientist actually invested in that. They're like a rocket ship right now. They tried now
Mm.
came out of stealth a couple of months back, and now are actually have the actual prototype. If you're in New York ever, you can actually go and see that on how cool and futuristic that data center looks like. So that's one element of it. If you look at on the other end, We talk about green cement and green concrete all the time because that's a big contributor to pollution that we have. So there's a startup called Vision. What they've done is they've taken carbon completely out of cement. So instead of using limestone, they use slag from electric furnaces to create the cement process. What this does is it reduces the temperature at which the kiln needs to operate, and therefore it can be electrified. So they've reduced carbon CO2 both from the ingredient perspective and also from the calcination perspective, thereby making almost a carbon neutral cement. And that is super exciting, right? Because traditional methods were only reducing carbon CO2 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%. They're reducing it by 90%. So that makes it very exciting for us. There are others which are like there's no code AI platforms, which are basically ingest any kind of information and help you do productivity tracking, progress monitoring, takeoffs, all in the same platform, right? I can keep going. There's so many interesting things happening here, but you get the gist of directions in which technology is moving.
Yeah. On the subject of the data centers in urban areas,
Hmm?
the question in a lot of people's minds has been, what do we do with all these vacant office buildings? And as you were speaking, I was like, oh, that's what we do. We just turn them into data centers. It's probably not as simple as that, but some of them can be turned into housing. But what do you do with the rest? Have,
So data centers, warehouses, housing, you'll probably have to do a mix of all of these things.
yeah.
But and having a data center also makes it more attractive, right? Because your connectivity footprint increases everywhere around you. So that has you're earning rent and it is making your property much more valuable. So that's got the eye of a lot of people.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So what is the cost to turn either say you just do it with the containers. Are they like shipping containers?
Right, these are modular, so the sizes are containers, but these can go through doorways and stuff. And but obviously you have to think about the capacity. You can't put a few megawatts. If it's a smaller one, you can put it. But if you're putting a few megawatts, you have to think about what is your fit out requirements. For example, will your grid support this? Will you have water available for what needs to be done? The small ones are easily installable, but if you want higher capacity, you'll want to figure out what changes you need to be done, but it's not significant. The feedback that we've received from so many developers that a lot of it is very doable without major changes.
Well, yeah, let's think about just an office building that's vacant. You have some open floor plates and you might have to drill some holes in the concrete for cooling and electricity and things like that. I suppose there's probably going to have to be like a TIF or something involved in it. But if that project then can come back to life and generate revenue again, that is a value add right there. And then if you can,
Um,
like you said, if it's a mixed use deal, you have maybe the data center on the, what would you do? Would you do it on the top or the bottom? You probably do it on the bottom because you get your lower rents at the bottom of a building. Say it's like a 30-story building. So maybe you do a couple of floors of it like that. And then you can use that hot water, we'll say, and use that to heat the swimming pool and the units in the winter. There, there we go. We got to figure it out.
and that's the concept, right? So it's solving multiple problems at once. And the macro for that is very supportive.
Yeah. And I think so here in Ohio, Intel's building a plant just outside of Columbus. Google
Mhm.
and Facebook both have massive data centers up there. And so I think that there are state and federal initiatives to help fill the gap of some of those programs as well. So that's amazing. Go ahead.
No, good, good.
I'm curious, you brought up affordable housing, which is
Mhm.
something I talk about every day in one capacity or in many different capacities, really. How have you seen some of the companies or solutions that have come across your desk? How are they helping to impact housing today? Because you see these, you can look at memes and say, all right, prices have gone up significantly. I talked to a guy today. I moved to Austin in 2019 and today it's 2024. He's like, the house doubled over 5 years. So h- how have you seen technology help with affordable housing? And
So
maybe let me if I may, I want to
Mhm.
pretext that because in like the LIHTC space, low income housing tax credits, the real estate is almost like a consequence of how the site scores. So it's okay if you have the perfect site in the perfect area and it's this close to shopping and income levels, and then that's where a building's going to get built. But that's not always where the need is. So
The way we think about this is how do we make building cheaper and more efficient,
yeah,
right? And we think about it at every stage of the process, right from the design phase. How do you optimize design and bring down the cost of design? How can you design for manufacturing, for example? Then you think about different models. We don't always have to build the way we're building today. Prefabrication could be interesting. Are there models around prefabrication that could reduce cost? Are there around models around microfactory that could bring the cost down? So what can we do to make sure that different models evolving, which will help us build much more capacity? Also, what are the processes which are adding cost to the process? Things like inspection, things like procurement, things like automation of risky and dangerous activities, and so on and so forth. How can we look at each of these and try to automate them, right? So we look at it from a full stack solution perspective and say, okay, how can we find solutions which help us? So they could be around project management. They could be around design. They could be robotic solutions for automating certain aspects of it. It could be inspection solutions where you're doing monitoring to avoid rework and stuff like that. So we are like, okay, how can we reduce waste from different parts of the value chain? If there's materials being wasted, can we recycle them? Or can we have platforms which can basically leverage this waste for using in other ways and so on and so forth? So it's not like one solution which is trying to solve everything, but it is like maybe 50 different solutions which are trying to solve specific problems and specific segments which are adding value. And incrementally, we think, yeah, drops of water make up a ocean, right? So
right.
we want to look at drops and then buckets and streams, and eventually this all adds up to efficiency in the construction process.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, I think I like the idea of modular a lot. And I think it's gotten a bad name in the past because typically if you think of modular, you think of like mobile home parks. But that's not what the future is for sure. I have a friend who's building ski houses that are
Hmm.
modular. He ships them in from wherever the factory is and puts them up, and from I think foundation to a finished product, it's like 2, 3 months
Yep,
versus start to finish on a new construction project, it's a year minimum, and that's assuming everything is in place. Uh,
exactly.
huh, that's amazing. Um, what else are you seeing? You see a lot of different deals. What else is on your radar?
See, the three areas where we have a lot of interest right now. One, first is around robotics. Robotics, we see a ton of things happening, primarily because of two reasons. There's a significant labor shortage in the industry, and that's only getting worse as people are retiring. Not enough people are coming to the workforce, so that's a big problem. And two, the robotic technologies are getting less expensive. So if you look at mobility platform, you look at lidar, you look at arms, and so on and so forth. Everything is getting less expensive and more accessible. So you don't have to build a robot from scratch. You can actually leverage a lot of different components to build in robotics. So that's a place that's interesting. Sustainability is another space where we see a lot of activity. Initially, we used to see most of it in Europe, but slowly US is also waking up that. And we're seeing things around materials. Seeing things around carbon tracking across the ecosystem. So we're lots of things around smart buildings. So that's a space where we're spending quite a bit of time. We also spending time around generative design. So AI is obviously a buzzword, but I think AI will have real use cases in construction, especially in the design phase. These are difficult problems to solve, but people are taking slivers of those problems and trying to solve them. For example, design around wastewater plants, so design around mechanical engineers, electrical, and so on and so forth. So that's also a space where we're seeing a lot. And from a sector perspective, infrastructure is quite hot right now. So we see a lot of activity in the infrastructure space.
Mhm. So when you talk about robotics in the construction industry,
Mhm.
comes to my mind is people robots that are out there actually laying brick or framing things. But what does it mean to you?
And see, people robots are not the ones I think will find the most success
Yeah.
at this point in time in construction. You have to pick an application and see where robotics makes sense. For example, you look at layout. The way a robot lays out is very different from the way a human lays out. So you have a significant enhancement by getting a robot to self-position and lay out. Right? You can save like 60% of your time or 70% of your time if the robot is doing the layout versus humans, right? Obviously, adjusting for site conditions, and it's not always designed for robots to operate and stuff. But you want to see something that is repetitive, or you want to see something that is dull and dangerous for people to do. And those are the kind of tasks we think are best for robots to be doing at this point in time. And today, we think adapting your robots to your use case makes a lot of sense, right? Eventually, you'll have multi-purpose robots which do a lot of things. But right now, having the cost positioning right is important. And you can build humanoids, but they're going to be super expensive at this point in time and not really practical for deployment on job sites.
Yeah. So I guess it's things like, as you're speaking, I'm thinking of housing developments or even multifamily construction where it is a lot of repetitive things like framing, putting
Mhm.
up the walls and even maybe building the walls. You have foundations and concrete, laying the
So,
roof.
so drywall finishing, flooring finishing,
Yeah.
anything where you can't reach, or you have to bend, or you have to go over the edges to install. For example, we have a company called Raise Robotics, which is installing anchor channels and helping you install facade. It's doing positioning while installing things, and it's drilling, installing brackets, and so this one would have required someone to be hanging off the ledge with the wires and stuff like that and doing the installations. And that's not something anybody should be doing, right? Putting their lives at risk. So this is able to go on ledges and install them and reduce health incidents and reduce insurance costs and so on.
Hmm. Yeah. You think about it and practically, if it's a tall building, they are hanging down over the ledge, or if it's a garden style product, they're probably up on a lift or some, but even that, it's not very efficient because the lift can only go up and down. You can drive it, but it's still not, I imagine. So it's like a Roomba essentially that climbs the walls and drills the holes and installs the anchor channels, if I'm
Yeah.
thinking about it.
And it can do quality inspection. So while it's installing, it can also give you details on where to install. So you're doing multiple things at the same time. You're measuring at the same time, then you're installing, you're doing quality checks. What would take multiple sets of humans to do, the robot can do all of it together at once.
Mhm. It sounds amazing, but it also sounds expensive. How do you mitigate the cost and make it so it is cost effective and beneficial for people to implement?
So firstly, you need to leverage the right tech stack, right? For example, if you're trying to build everything on your own, it gets expensive.
Yeah.
But if your mobility platform is from someone off the shelf, if your arms are from someone,
Mhm.
and you're only looking at perception and you're looking at what's core to you and spending time, then it's not so expensive. But if you're trying to develop everything on your own, then it could start to get expensive, right? If it's not designed very well, right? So the robot that I spoke about is already better than parity. It's less than human cost at this point in time in terms of cost of operations. And this is while the robot is still very early in its journey. And that's only going to get better.
Yeah. So it's just it's being aware of what's out there in the market, then taking the products that are, off the shelf, so to speak, and assembling the pieces. And that's awesome. It's fascinating. The future is here, isn't it?
The future is already here. And we built this robotics map for construction. And we mapped about 70 startups. This was about a year and a half back. Today, there's probably more than 100 startups in this space. And that's construction robotics. That's not anything else. And we'd say we're still in the early innings, but there's a lot out there already.
Hmm. How do you, 150 years ago, buggy whips were an industry and slide rules back 50, 60 years ago were a thing. And there are unions, for instance, that have a vested interest in keeping their people employed. I don't want to say how do you combat that, but how do you dovetail the new technology with also keeping people working? Because work for you, and I'm sure for you, and also for me, coming to work gives me purpose. And if I didn't have it, like I would not be in a great place.
But by and large, these robots are not replacing people. They're augmenting people. Right? And the reason people are starting to use this is because they just can't find people. There's such a
Yeah.
significant shortage of people in the job site that it's the question is not about whether I need to replace them. The question is how can I actually get work done, right? So that's what's driving a lot of this adoption. And the second part is you're creating also more jobs, right? You're creating more jobs like you're creating robotic engineers, people who are managing equipment and so on and so forth, which makes it better for different types of talent come into this industry. And finally, use of these technology actually extends the life of people who are working. For example, if you wear an exoskeleton today and do your work, you could probably extend your retirement age by 5 years. So people can actually work longer and get fewer injuries if they leverage some of these solutions. And there are very few solutions which are fully autonomous today. So most solutions are collaborative solutions, which still need an operator, which still need guidance, which still are not good around the edges and stuff like that. So if they augment the existing labor force rather than replace them, that's at least true as of now, right? Because I don't think there's any solution good enough to completely take over the job site at this point.
Yeah, and that's so again to bring it back to needle. I feel like we're doing a similar thing. We're creating a tool, right?
Mhm.
You still have to go out there and do the work. We're in a people to people business. It just helps you do your work that much more efficiently. And it sounds like you're saying the same thing.
Exactly.
Hmm. This is great. This is fascinating. What are some of the favorite companies? Maybe not favorite, because I'm sure they're like your children. They all have a special place for you, but maybe what are you working on today that really has you excited?
Uh, Quite a few things. So I mentioned a few companies already. Yeah. So our first investment was a company called Document Crunch. So Document Crunch is basically a platform where you can review contracts and it gives you insights on what's there and gives you recommendations and stuff like that. So helps you process through contracting documents very quickly. And construction is a industry where everything is based on contracts. So literally, it's a risk mitigation industry, and people spend hours and hours on reviewing contracts and trying to get that done. So the reason we are excited about them is this is built by a lawyer who's worked in the construction industry and understood the pain points so clearly, right? And he's taken a pain point which is prevalent all across and provided such a simple solution to start with that it's taken away the dreary job that most people hated
Right.
doing, right?
Contract
And
review.
and lawyers were always a bottleneck, and today they're not becoming a bottleneck because
Yeah,
they're
they
just like
definitely are.
it, and one of the best things you can get as a startup is your customer feedback, right? So they sold the solution to a contractor, and the owner of the company 3 months later writes them a note saying, "Hey Josh, this week I was just able to take a week off. The first time I could do that in 10 years, and that's
Wow.
because Document Crunch helped me save all that time for me to be able to go take this vacation." And coming from an owner of a company, that is truly special, right? That is truly
Yeah.
special and shows the value that it is providing to you directly. And now they're also expanding to other kinds of documents and all of that. So it's been really nice to see their journey over the last couple of years since they invested. And they're continuing to do very well, get great feedback, expanding to various partnerships and document types and so on. So very excited about what they're doing.
So and that sounds amazing because, like you said, attorneys are a bottleneck for better or for worse. Sometimes you can intentionally build in a delay, but oftentimes it's not intentional. It's just, hey, I'm so busy. That means I'm so good. But with a company like that, what do you see as the arc of its lifespan? Is it to go public? Is it to be acquired by another firm? Like when you're investing with if you're an early or seed stage investor, maybe, how do you steer or what do you want to see in their business plan? Or is it just, hey, we're going to figure it out? I don't know.
You probably want more than you're going to figure it out. But if you think about IPOs itself, only about 10 to 15 of percent of successful startups end up in IPOs, right? Even of the successful startups, 85% are acquisition. So for us, in the base case scenario is mostly an acquisition. Even a lot of things have to go right for you to reach the IPO. But even though that is a usual goal on try to get them to work towards that goal, right? But we don't want to start thinking about so many years or already. So we come in so early, and our objective is to say, okay, build the right product, make sure you're adding value to your customers, make sure you're getting the right GTM motion going, you get your pricing right, you have your clear roadmap for product expansion, right? What, which features are you building? Is it becoming a platform? So all of those things are what we want to focus on, right? Making sure you're solving the right problem and you're solving it effectively and creating a long list of followers as you're doing this. And as you're doing this, you start to become a larger and larger company. And if you keep that at the front of everything that you're doing, then eventually you'll end up in a good place, right? You'll end up either being acquired or an IPO or whatever it is.
Mhm.
But you don't want to put the cart before the horse, right? You want to solve the problem and add value and make sure while you're doing it, your economics are right, your efficiencies are good, your traction rates fast, you're building the right teams and all of that. And then things will take care of itself.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm just absorbing the good advice you're offering me. The future or continuing to have evolving technologies, where do you see, say, the construction industry in 10 years? Do you see a lot more robotics and materials changing? Curious about your thoughts there.
The construction typically is a slow moving industry. It's not something that's changing dramatically. But incrementally changes keep happening. And I think the pace of change has accelerated in the last 4 or 5 years. Ever since COVID, the pace of digitization has increased. Now with AI, things are going to move even faster. So when I see the industry 10 years from now is definitely more robotics. So that's almost a given considering the way labor rates are moving and the availability is moving. The new materials, I think there will be a few. I don't see it dramatically changing because these materials have to change availability and all of that is not as trivial, but I do see more greener practices. I do see more digitization. I do see a greater level of transparency and collaboration. And if all of these things start happening, likely some consolidation as well, because today it is super, super fragmented. And if the biggest are gaining from efficiency and scale, then you would see some level of consolidation that's going to happen in the industry as well, which I don't think is a terrible thing to have.
And do you think that the consolidation comes from a company like Hilti or somebody like that, or is it gonna be backed by venture capital? Like, how do you see that playing out?
It's going to be a mix. I see. I don't think it happens through Hilti. I think it happens through a GC. For example, some of the European GCs are buying up companies
Oh, okay.
and they're moving forward. So I see a lot more of that happen. I see the big companies start to win more projects. If you look at the data center space, that is much more concentrated from a builder perspective than your residential space.
Sure.
Uh, on the other hand, we also see PEs buying up a lot of these companies. These are buying up a lot of subcontractors in the residential space, pavers and other industries and so on and
Right.
so forth. So I see that continue to happen. I see consolidation happening in that space as well.
Yeah.
So I think it'll happen in uh, all of these three places: acquisitions, organic growth, and consolidation from PE players.
Mhm. And so if a large GC is buying up these tech companies, are they or these solutions companies, we'll call them, are they licensing that? Uh,
So not the tech companies, those large GCs are actually buying other small GCs and
oh, I
expanding
see.
their footprint
Yeah,
and then deploying these technologies, which will give them benefits of scale and technology.
I
So
see.
it's a If you meant the technology companies, then it would be players like Hilti or Procore or Autodesk or one of these people who would be doing the acquisitions there.
And then they license it because they sell things and solutions. So I would imagine.
They absorb it. It becomes part of the portfolio. So
Yeah.
they don't even need to license it. They can, yeah, it could be licensed, it could be sold, whatever business model they are.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that you mapped the whole construction tech landscape at one point. How did you do that?
So segments of that, right? So for example, we
Segments.
did a construction robotics map. We did a green concrete map. We've done maps in specific regions, right? And it, back in the days when I started in this about 7, 8 years back, there are probably 1,000 startups in construction. Today we have more than 7,000 in database, which is just scratching the surface, right? So it's gone, it's gone basically much wider than we thought expected it to, and it's great for everyone. But right now the universe is really, really large.
Yeah. That's amazing. Bevan, this has been a really great conversation. I really appreciate your time. If somebody is interested in getting in touch with you, what's the best way that they can reach out?
Easiest is LinkedIn. So you can
Yeah.
just drop me a note in LinkedIn. I'm usually quite responsive.
Okay.
So have Vivin Hegde, very easy person to find, usually accessible. I'm at a lot of construction tech conferences as well. But also through our website, we are very responsive and people apply to Zacua from the website and stuff. Any of those forums is good.
Awesome. Thanks again for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Stash. It was great to be here.
Good. All right.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.